We are through week 3 in Rhode Island, and we're going to break down all the games here on the Postgame show. There are 2 teams left that haven't lost a game, and they will play in week 4, so we'll definitely look ahead a little bit to that matchup as well. But we have some analysts standing by, and it's going to be a good postgame show. We had the top 4 teams all playing each other and the bottom 4 teams all playing each other, so there's stats and close games, and it was getting more hype than last week, and it was kind of the new analyst's first look at kind of how this stuff usually goes when we get some more competitive games than we had in the first couple weeks, and the teams are getting more comfortable. So a very exciting show ahead. Let's get to our sponsor and the theme song, and we'll break down week 3 in Rhode Island for you guys. This episode is presented by Initial Response Restoration, 24/7 emergency services for water, fire, storm, and mold damages. Contact Initial Response Restoration. They're really good people. We restore, you recover. All right, let's shout out to our sponsor, and let's get to the show. Yeah. This is the Legacy League. Tell me where your legacy be. Yeah. We talked about it. The Skyhawks and the Road Dogs escape week 3 without a loss, and they'll play in week 4. So an exciting matchup. We're going to tell you how they got there, how the Road Dogs beat Lob City, how the Skyhawks took care of the Halfway Crooks, and the other 2 matchups as well. 4 really good games from week 3. Jess, Matt, and Mike standing by. We're going to go right in order because it was a good order. And it's funny, kind of the way the schedule fell. This is the first week where I talked about it in the intro. The top 4 teams all play each other, and the bottom 4 teams, 3 of the next 4 weeks after this also follow that format, where the Skyhawks play the Halfway Crooks twice, and Lob City takes on the Road Dogs twice throughout the season. So those teams already played once, and let's kind of break down what happened when Lob City and the Road Dogs played in week 3. It was an 81-66 win for the Road Dogs. It was a 10-point edge after the first quarter, and I was doing my homework. They only trailed for maybe a minute. We can say maybe within the first 2 minutes of the game. And once they took the lead at that point, they never trailed again. They were able to jump on early and continue on there. Let's go over some of the stats here. Almar Sabat with 27 for Lob City, but we're going to talk a lot about the Road Dogs. 5 players in double figures. And we'll go to Matt first. I mean, this is a matchup between two highly ranked teams in our rankings, 2 teams that we expect to be in the championship conversation. And Matt, what did the Road Dogs do kind of from the jump there to get a lead against Lob City and then really never, get rid of that lead? And we're never really threatened either, which I was waiting for that Lob City run to kind of come, especially once they had some more subs show up. But what did the Road Dogs do to kind of hold off that run?
Well, from the jump for me starts when they first came in the arena. They came in and they were very vocal. They'd clearly watched, the post game last week, and they were very aware of the fact that, they weren't the one that was majorly picked to win that game. So I think they came in with a chip on their shoulder, and they came in ready to play. The big story for me was you mentioned Lob City coming in, starting with 4 players, more players coming in as the game went on. But I've talked about this in the past. That has to be a little bit difficult to sort of deal with, especially when you're dealing with the talent that the Road Dogs have, especially on the defensive end. I felt like the fact that the Road Dogs could rotate in a complete list of new 5 guys and just cause havoc in the paint. That commitment really paid off, and sort of having that advantage really paid off for them.
And yeah, that depth, we talked about it, right? So Kareem Cooper with 18 and 7, Joe Secator 16, Kevin Views with 15, Shaq Arju with 13, and Ethan Austin with 10. And so everybody getting in on the action. Jess, you can go next and kind of, build on that if you'd like, but even kind of from more of a Lob City perspective, and just to kind of give you a little more of their stats. Talked about Almar Sabat and Cody Crawford with his 23. No one else cracked 10 points, and so 3 of 11 from Hachi Amini. That's one of those players that we were kind of waiting to get going, kind of waiting for that Lob City run, and Nuri Mahmoud with 7 and 3, and was able to have an impact on both ends, but it was just too much Road Dogs, Jess.
Yeah, when you have a team like Lob City who are, they have a reputation of being champions, right? So you're, like you said, waiting for them to kind of get ahead, take that lead. But for me personally, when I saw the Road Dogs come in, I kind of had a feeling that that run wasn't going to come for them. You know, like you said, Cody Crawford has been kind of at the top of his team, but there's only so much that he can do when also they've had short players. When you got 4 people playing the whole game, getting tired, getting frustrated because they've been trailing the whole team, you know, the whole game, it's kind of hard to get that run to keep going. So I think they struggled to gain that momentum within their team, and the Road Dogs, they were just waiting for the win. They were hyped for it. You know, talking to Kareem Cooper during the post-game interview, he kind of just talked about how they wanted to have fun with it. They came in with that high energy, and I think that's all that they needed to take that win.
That energy, Mike, so kind of talk about this and the Road Dogs. I mean, we talked about them getting an advantage early, and a lot of it was on defense, right? And so a lot of it really started, you know, with that defensive intensity, and you know, they were able to turn that defense into offense. So how did they do that so well in this game, Mike?
Yeah, honestly, I think it was their poise, really. I mean, they have so many great players coming off the bench, and I think Kareem Cooper was a big portion of that, as Jessica just mentioned. I mean, he is an all-defensive player, 2-time All-Star, and debatably the player of that game for the Road Dogs. And they were just able to fight off the comeback. You know, Lob City was able to break it down to 11, but then as the fourth quarter came along, they were able to just keep that lead up and finish out the game.
Yeah, never got it closer than that, right? And we talked about it a couple times, like in the third quarter it was 15, and it's like, oh, well, if we start doing some math and they kind of get this to, you know, single digits going into the fourth, like who knows? And the Road Dogs never let it get there, so shout out to them. Our last 2 champions, actually, in this matchup. So Lob City won most recently, and we talked about it, the Road Dogs won a year ago last summer. So we previewed next week's matchup, and we'll do more of that later in the show, where in week 4 it will be the Skyhawks and Road Dogs, our 2 3-0 teams. The 2 teams that lost to those 2 teams in week 3 will play in week 4 in Lob City and the Halfway Crook. So they're kind of switching opponents and making for 2 more great games in week 4 coming up on Monday. Yeah, let's kind of shift to how the Skyhawks were able to also get to 3-0 and a closer game until the last couple minutes where the Skyhawks pulled away, and they do defeat the Halfway Crooks. Let me get the score right. 64-56. I lived it. I should know the score, but it was very close in the final 2 or 3 minutes. If you know, a tied game in the final 2, 3, 4 minutes. It was that close, kind of matching baskets, and you know, we can talk about the lack of scoring or the you know, pace really slowing down, and this type of defense, you know, rim protection, nothing easy. Like both teams are like excited to get out in transition because it gives them a chance at an easy basket, and even then, it's not a given. You know, whether the team, you know, one guy who's back guarding 2 is able to get a steal, is able to get a block, and both teams are able to do that. But the Skyhawks made more plays doing that for sure. Omar Rahman, 22 points and 4 threes, and those were daggers in that fourth quarter. At least 2 or 3 of those threes to really kind of give his team the edge. Noah James with 15, 5 of 16 shooting. So, you know, we're going to talk about some matchups here, not to spend more time on this game than the first game, but it was closer. Nick Lemoyne with 17, Kavai Simpson with 11, David DePino only with 6, and kind of waited for him to get going, but 6 of 15 from 3 and only 5 of 17 from 3 for the Skyhawks. So not a ton of shooting, a lot of going to the basket, a lot of rim protection both ways. Let's flip the order around. So Mike, you know, this one, kind of the first time the Halfway Crooks had those 3 players together, the 3 players I mentioned, DePina, Simpson, and Lemoyne, but it was the Skyhawks, you know, really able to withstand that, use some of their depth, and, you know, like I said, pull away in the last couple minutes and get the win.
Yeah, I also think it's a big size advantage. I think that's not something that we've talked about too much about the Skyhawks. They have, you know, a couple bigger players when it comes to playing a team like the Halfway Crooks. And also just, as I mentioned, the poise, but also with Noah James being your starting point guard, facilitating the ball. He can get a shot really well, but he didn't shoot too great in this game, only 1 for 5 from 3. But he was dishing it out to his other players, his other bigs. So he's able to move the ball around quickly, and that's something that the Halfway Crooks just could not stand.
For sure. And so, yeah, the Halfway Crooks trying to find those matchups, right? And so we'll get Matt back in here and some of that, and even just, you know, what you saw, Matt, with kind of the pace. And I talk about it all the time, and it's funny. You can feel it, especially when you're playing, but also watching. The court tilts, you know, and on the screen you can kind of see me doing it with my hand. But there wasn't a lot of moments where it tilted either way, right? Like in that Road Dogs game, it kind of felt like Lob City was taking it out of their basket, kind of having to slowly bring it up because the Road Dogs just got a steal and a fast break dunk, right? And it kind of felt like it more of an uphill kind of game for them at times. There was times Lob City kind of had it going the other way, right? But in the Skyhawks Halfway Crooks game, it was more of a seesaw. It's like, all right, kind of the Skyhawks get kind of 5 or 7 in a row, and the Halfway Crooks were able to cut into that lead in the third quarter. When they were down kind of consistently 6, 7, 8, 9 points, and we talked about how close it was in the fourth map. But yeah, so kind of how did both teams stop each other from going on those big runs that we've seen in the first couple weeks?
That, from the Skyhawks, a lot of what I see is through the lens of the camera, because that's what I'm doing in the game. And I felt like their strategy was a little bit different this week. I can't say so much for the Halfway Crooks, but maybe I just didn't notice it. But it really struck me, Omar Rahman, most of my photos in most weeks are of him dunking. Not to say he didn't go to the basket in this week, but I did notice that a lot of more of the photos that I thought were compelling this week were more him at the point, directing people, intentionally bringing the ball up the court in a more methodical, thought out sort of way, and a little bit more of a general feel to him and some of the content that I was able to capture of him this week. So that was kind of what I noticed that stood out about that team particularly, is I felt like they tried to slow the game down, whereas in the past I would describe them as a firepower team throwing the ball down the court. This week I felt like they felt, we're going to have to slow this team down, we're going to have to be a little bit more methodical, and I thought Omar Rahman sort of in a lot of ways took that on his shoulders as kind of at the point.
It definitely felt that way, and I'm not sure if it was intentional. I mean, that was the result, right? Both teams ended up playing slower and kind of, playing into that, and that goes to the final score, right? 60-50, like we talked about in the interview, and we'll get to Jess in a second. But that pace, I'm sure both teams would rather, get out and run, right? It's kind of just how sometimes it works out when both teams are able to score and do some similar things. But yes, that resulted in Omar Rahman having the ball more, not flying down the court, right? And still being effective in that role of setting up his teammates and creating offense in more of a half-court set. Jess, we forgot to mention, and it's never too late, one of the only ones to pick the Road Dogs, so I'm sorry to leave that out of the first section. So she has some street cred going here with the players who I told you they listen, guys, and you heard it this week a lot about, we heard who you picked, screw you guys, all that good stuff. I forget who everyone picked in this game, and it's not a big deal. But Jess, in this one, talk about that fourth quarter, and even, it was very back and forth, like bucket for bucket. Omar would hit a 3, and the Crooks would kind of come back and get a 2, and also Lawrence Reed, we need to shout him out, making at least two big threes in the fourth quarter to kind of keep the Halfway Crooks matching the other buckets. But what was the difference in that fourth quarter, Jess?
Yeah, I think that the ability for the teams to be able to slow down that pace, I feel like it was very beneficial for both teams. They were able to keep their energy and keep that going back and forth. Defense, I think, was just huge. Like, especially in the fourth, if someone would get a basket and then someone else would bring it back. I was really impressed with Nick Lemoyne. I feel like he was always able to drive to the basket, get points up for his team, never let him being behind, kill his energy or kill his vibe that he was giving. So I think that everyone's ability to just be able to bounce off of each other and get back and forth. And, the Skyhawks, they just have this team chemistry that regardless if it's a fast game or a slow game, that I think they know that they can rely on. So I think that's what ultimately gave them the win at the end.
The Skyhawks using that chemistry, right, that they've been building over these first couple weeks, and the Halfway Crooks trying to develop that chemistry, having those 3 players we talked about, there for the first time together and kind of seeing how that looks. But a very competitive game, a game we will get again later in the season, and maybe a third time if we're lucky in the playoffs. But Matt, you want to jump back in?
About the Skyhawks game, sorry, I was messing with my mic there. That was the game that I was kind of most interested in. I mentioned last week, that the Halfway Crooks were the team that interested me the most, and that was the sort of the result that I was most interested in. I was very disappointed that I didn't get to see Joey Zocco on the floor. I thought like maybe there was an edge that he could give the team, and I was very disappointed I didn't get to see that.
Yeah, listen, who the hell was I going to guard was what it came down to. But it also, in that regard, is always better to, and what I decided to do was to see some of these matchups and kind of get some of those different lineups in there. And then we get to the fourth quarter, and not that that's the first time I want to play anyway. But then that lineup, and we can stay on this a little longer before we move on, of Terrence Gallo, Lawrence Reed, I think it was definitely David DePina, and then Nick/Kavai, and I think it was Nick, to start the fourth. That was getting defensive stops, and then Lawrence was making threes, David was getting to the basket, like Terrence was doing Terrence thing. Like, oh, all right, this lineup is actually like having success on both ends. That's just kind of how the game fell, and it happens. It's all right. You see me next week. I'll be here. Don't worry. I'm here all night. So the halfway crooks fall to 2-1, and we talked about they get Lob City, and the Skyhawks get ready for an undefeated showdown in Week 4 with the Road Dogs, who also won. Our third game in Week 3, it's Rags getting their first win by 3 points over the RI Warriors. Talk about intensity. Right, guys? 60-57, Rags get the win. The RI Warriors made it interesting. They had a chance, I believe, with the ball down 3, if I remember correctly, after some fouling and some missed free throws, and that's kind of how it shakes out. And they missed a 3 to tie it. It might have been with about 20, 30 seconds left. It wasn't like at the buzzer, but they did have the ball with a chance to tie and just unable to fully complete the comeback. But they made it interesting at times when it was looking like Rags was fully in control. And so, for these last two, this game's good too. You guys can all jump in on this one. Jess, you get to go first this one. And Rags, led by Josh Perry, 25, and he kind of threw it back to Week 1, right? So now we need to see if it's like an odd week thing with him, and that's semi-kidding because I expect him to have another great game next week. But he was especially good time and time again in this one. Whenever Rags needed a bucket, offense was a little stagnant, and he's like, I'll do it. He would hit, an 18, 19 footer right inside the 3-point line. He was hitting his threes in this one, 4 of 6, and really is that point guard, right? Is what gets this team going. Bezal Masood and Brandon Kakela with 12 each. Everyone that played had 5 points at least for the RI Warriors, so some balance there. Only 12 of 25 from 3. So we talk about kind of them most of the time trying to get that number up. They were attacking the basket more against this Rags team, and I think they kind of saw a little bit of an edge there. But yeah, Jess, what did they? I think that's right. We're going to Jess next. Yeah, we're doing it anyway. Rags in this one gets the 3-point win. How did they hold on?
I've actually been really excited to talk about this because looking at Josh Perry, game 1, he came out straight up, like nobody really knew how he was going to play. I believe he hadn't been with the league before. And game 1, he came out 39 points. Everyone was like, he was hitting threes, he was going to the basket. And, in game 2, he dipped a little bit. He went down to 22. I checked that. But then this game back up 25. So he's on the back of the come up. I think that we really got to see more of his Week 1 energy this past game because the Rags, they were due for their win. They were ready to get back. And I know they talked about how they're a family, and playing with people who are like family to you, there's just like nothing better than that. So I'm honestly really, really happy that they were able to get that win.
They lose by 12 in Week 2 to Lob City. And if you remember, we talked about it a lot last week, and I still have my notes here, but they were up by 9 in the third quarter, right? Not to do that whole game over again. But they were competing in Week 2, and they left Week 2 0-2, despite all of that. And so definitely looking for their first win. They get it done in a close one, which just shows, like, even when you kind of don't, this team, we expect this team to win, you never know. You never know in this damn league. Matt, and RI Warriors, Rags, you can go whichever direction you'd like, but a game of runs because Rags was up double digits multiple times throughout this game and never really able to deliver, that knockout punch, right? We saw it in the finals with the Pacers, and it kills me. They were up 10 in that third quarter, right, in game 4 there, and unable to make a free throw, unable to make a bucket, and kind of same thing for Rags. They were right there, up 12, rolling, and just unable to get that one more stop to get it to 15 or 8, to kind of keep stringing that together. What'd you see, and how was that made possible by the RI Warriors, Matt?
First, I'd just like to echo what Jess said about Josh Perry. He's definitely someone who I've noticed, is aware that there are times where he's going to have to carry things, And, as a new player, that can be difficult to figure out how that goes along. But, I felt like in that game he made every single shot that he needed to make for that team. And, what I notice about that team is, you mentioned that they're a family. As from the photography perspective, one of the easiest teams to see and potentially get shots of high fives and things like that. So that's always great to see. Conversely, on the other end with the RI Warriors, I got to be honest, like the thing that I noticed most of them was, it's a team that plays with passion. It's a team that relies on its passion. But again, it can be a double-edged sword. There were times where, there was yelling at each other, there was yelling at the other team, there was yelling at the audience a couple times, and then there was yelling, and I couldn't really tell who was being yelled at. And I have to wonder, if that, even though, again, they wear their heart in their sleeves, they're engaged, if, that was maybe a little bit of the difference in the end.
They definitely, passion was a good way to put it, and I was going to laugh if you were going to kind of stop there, and then you went full tilt for it, which is great. Yeah, they were yelling at their friends in the stand, that's, what to expect from the RI Warriors, unless they can chill out. And we'll see if I can get Brandon to chill out, because he told me to tell him just to chill out, so I will. I'll tell him on the pod once a week, Brandon, chill out. But the RI Warriors, despite all of that, right, Mike, like right there, right? And so, it took a fourth quarter run. They started hitting some threes. Bezal Masood, connected on a couple, and they left him in when, maybe they were going to take him out because it just wasn't his night. Turned that around really quick. I think a key, which is actually crazy, I just saw this, and so, Mike, you can touch on this, 37 rebounds for the RI Warriors to 20 for Rags. And so, sure, we're not perfect. Even if those numbers are plus or minus 3 or 4 rebounds, it's still an edge for the RI Warriors, which I would not have expected, and we don't expect that going into these games. We've talked about kind of their size is an issue. They're going to shoot a lot of threes. They're going to play from the perimeter. Probably free throws are down for that exact reason, because they're taking more threes than attacking the basket. For them to win the rebounding edge and still kind of be in the position they were in is pretty crazy, because usually that kind of thing keeps you much closer in games like this, Mike.
Yeah, getting rebounds is great, but when you don't have, necessarily the right person to kick the ball out to, it's not going to be so helpful and efficient for your team. I heard a couple of the RI Warriors players after the game on the sidelines talking about how, compared to other teams, they don't have a dominant ball handler and a dominant facilitator, unlike the Rags, who, obviously, as we touched on, Josh Perry with 25 points. Kevin Vader coming off the bench didn't have too many minutes. I really think that he could be their dominant ball handler and their dominant facilitator. But, it was Paul Furtado missing that three with 5 seconds left. It was a good shot, just could not make it in. And then, obviously, who had to say something about it, but Rags were able to pull out the win.
A great way to end that game. And so, Rags get the win. It's their first win on the season. And they, 1-2. And next week, as I find all my tabs over here, Rags takes on Gold Rush to kick off week 4. We're going to talk about Gold Rush being one of the 2 0-3 teams joining the RI Warriors, who fall by 3 and fall to 0-3. All right, let's get to that last game, Air Mambas and Rags. And it was just the Air Mambas kind of doing their thing, pulling away and winning their first game in grand fashion. 101-62, Air Mambas get the win. They improve to 1-2, the same record as Rags, and those teams will play. Let's see if I can get this right. Week 6, so we have a little while for that matchup, which will be interesting. But in this one, they defeat Gold Rush, thanks to Mario Valerio's 26 and 5, Chris Vincenzo 21 and 7. I mean, these, they had 6 players with at least 11 points, and that was all 6 players who showed up, so we love that. Everybody got in the scoring column there for Gold Rush. Wyatt DeMarco, former analyst, shout out. 17 points, 9 rebounds, led the way. Kyle Wolf with 16, 5 of 27 from 3, right? So kind of 33 rebounds, and they got crushed on the boards too against the Air Mambas. So when you're not making a ton of threes, and then the rebounding stuff isn't going your way to get some of those second chances, it kind of ends how we saw it end, right? Just where things kind of continue to go against you. But Jess, we can go back to you. We'll just kind of keep going around. But the Air Mambas, and we're going to lead this into our Week 4 conversation, where the Air Mambas take on the RI Warriors. So we talked about those two teams yelling at each other, or the RI Warriors yelling at people in the stands. They were yelling at the Air Mambas, who they are friends with, but they were having, so just wait until they play, because it's more of that, because it's even more heated, because instead of those people being on the sidelines, they are the opponent on the court. So you can imagine, we keep things in check, but they're friends, and so it never, gets out of hand, but it's loud. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of passion, as Matt would say. It's a great word for that. They yell at each other. All right, Jess, the Air Mambas in week 3. How did they pull away and run away with this one?
Yeah, I mean, everyone who saw that game just saw the Air Mambas were just on top. I mean, Mario Valerio, he has been scoring the most points for his team in the last 3 weeks, if you look back and see. So, I mean, as you just saw, like, they had that energy. They were going up. They were trying things. They were doing their dunks. Like, I feel like it was very early on shown that they were going to take that game. It was one of those. And I just want to touch on Gold Rush really quickly, because people like Kyle Wolf, who's getting points for the team, I feel like people were calling him the floater, right? He had this float shot. I think that he really struggled to get his float shot up with the Air Mambas, usually getting 30 points a game. I think it was a lot harder for Gold Rush to get up, because, I mean, I don't think they really have that main ball handler, as we were talking about with the other teams. But I could see players like Tyler McNeil. I saw him get a few dunks. I could see him on the come up if they utilize him, and just hoping to get grounds down in their team. But I mean, Air Mambas, great game for them.
Yeah, and Mike, we'll go to you in a second, because your first time on the show. I was just looking at the stats, and the Gold Rush had 6 assists, right? And do we know who else had 6 assists that we forgot to mention earlier in the show? The Skyhawks, which is crazy that they had the same amount of assists as a team in their game, and how different those games looked, right? And so I don't know what that says more about, which we can discuss later. If we'll see how the Skyhawks rebound from that, and I'm sure they'll have more assists next week. Same thing with Gold Rush, because it's difficult to do that consistently. 6 assists when you're, let's look at the Gold Rush. They made 26 shots. Right, and so that's just hard to do playing basketball, because you're not going to do that one-on-one the entire time like that. But they did it in week 3, Mike. And so Air Mambas and Gold Rush. What'd you like? What'd you see?
Yeah, well, as we're talking about the rebounds, it was Steve Simone and Kenyon Lawrence, leading the way with the rebounds, 11 each for both of them. So as we talked about, Mauro Valero and Chris Vincenzo very aggressive, going to the basket. You can expect some kind of highlight reel dunk, usually if he makes his way towards the paint. But from Gold Rush, as we touched on about the RI Warriors, there's really not a dominant ball handler on that team. They have Kyle Wolf, but he can't do much when he doesn't have anyone to facilitate to. So they're not grabbing enough rebounds. They're not hitting enough threes, as we said, 5 or 27. So they definitely need to improve their shooting. If they want to continue finding success in this league. But unfortunately, they fall drastically to the Air Mambas.
Yeah, and Matt, you can go any direction you'd like on this one with the Air Mambas. Then we're getting to the one-word game. I wasn't going to do it. We're going to do it, and it's Mike's first time, so I'm excited. But go ahead, Matt.
Well, I'll just go back to kind of what I said last week, that I thought the Air Mambas were the dark horse team. I wasn't. They were the most difficult when thinking about the power rankings, exactly where to put them, and I'll be honest, I didn't change my power rankings. I kept it the exact same as it came out last week. But that was the team that I was, the most thought about if they should move up or if they should stay, if that should change. I ultimately, thought that, Gold Rush has been the team so far that has had the most struggles, as far as, scoring points and in the games and stuff like that so far. They obviously the Air Mambas really had, a larger margin than, Rags' victory. But I almost felt like I gave Rags more credit for sort of the struggle that they had to go through. So, I've seen the Air Mambas, not quite win the game a couple times, and I've seen them blow someone out. I almost need to see more exactly. I still consider them sort of a dark horse as far as kind of where they fit in. But I do want to do a shout out to Chris Vincenzo, who, the photo that we were going to include on the scores this week, in my opinion, might be the best photo I've taken all year. But no, clearly a lot of talent on that team, but I'm still, I said last week I'm waiting to see something more. I'm not quite sure what that is yet, but that's the team, if anything, that I feel like I still haven't seen exactly sort of who they are and the extent of, what they've got and what they can do.
And the good part of that, and I was thinking about it as you were talking, is Gold Rush, started with Lob City and the Halfway Crooks, right? So not, the easiest way to kind of start. And every team does play every team, which is great. So we kind of get to see all of these different matchups and how teams fare and how they look against different types of opponents. Because as much as it is about talent or depth or anything like that, teams play different too, right? Like the Skyhawks, the first 2 weeks were like super up tempo, and so that's difficult for some teams. And then, other teams like the RI Warriors take a ton of threes. We do this, we talk about this while we talk about the teams. But we'll see next week, and that's what we're going to get to. Gold Rush and Rags, which will be interesting, because kind of two, sure, teams will like throw it down the court when they can, but two teams that kind of are okay with bringing it up and playing a little slower. So we're going to, that could be your one word. And so, Mike, I'll explain the game in a second. But let's do it. Let's get to it. And it keeps it nice and short. It's nice. We're doing it for every game because the people listen, and it's great, and it starts some controversy, and it puts you on the spot. So let's get to the one-word game presented by Initial Response Restoration. All right, Mike, new at this. Here's how it works. We're going to go game by game. You get to make your pick for the game, especially with next week being a week with a lot of games that, hearing your picks will be interesting. And then after you pick your team, you get to say one word. It's a very creative name. I know you had no idea that's how this was going to go. You get to say one word, why you made that pick, and that's it. You don't get to explain it, and then we get to kind of, it's like the mystery of it. Like, oh, what'd you mean by, words that can have multiple meanings, right? All right, so we'll have Mike go last for this one. You can get some, practice in watching everyone else. We'll just go right in order. Gold Rush and Rags, we were just talking about this game, teasing it a little bit. That'll kick off week 4. Jess, you can go first. She's been thinking. I've been watching. She's been ready for this. So who do you have winning this one?
I have the Rags.
Okay, and what's your one word?
Perry times 2. It's
all right,
word.
she's already cheating. She's already cheating. I love it. Last week we had no cheaters.
Last week you said that, you mentioned that you could cheat and no one did, so I'm going to take advantage of that.
All right, so now we're all right. That's fine. You get one cheat a week. That's good.
Okay.
All right, Matt, who do you have in this one?
Can you tell me what the matchup was again? I was looking at something. I don't have my
Gold
phone
Rush
on.
and Rags. Who you got?
I got Rags.
Okay, and your one word.
I would say Perry.
All right. We got some copycats over here, Mike. Don't do it. God damn it. Don't say the same word. All right, Mike, who do you got in this one?
I also have the Rags.
Okay. And then so that's a sweep for the Rags, and what's your one word?
So we were talking about this a little bit,
No. That's more than one word.
I'm not going to...
No, literally one word.
D-Rose. That's my
Okay.
one word.
That's it. That counts. That's it. Yeah, you don't get to explain it because we'll be here all night. It's all good. All right, we can let people's imagination and they can ask you in person. I love it. All right, our next game. He starts out his first time on the show, starts out with a damn sentence in the one-word game. That's not how this works. Halfway Crooks and Lob City at 7:30 in week 4. Remember, there's always an opportunity to get some brownie points. Take advantage at your own risk here, Mike. You can pick my team, and it's good for your future. I'm kidding. Pick who you think's going to win. All right, Matt. Lob City, Halfway Crooks. Who you got?
I got to go with, what I've said before, Halfway Crooks. That's kind of my team.
All right. What's your one word?
I'm going to steal one from Jess
No.
Oh,
That's too many words.
Height.
Okay. Height. Okay. All right, Jess, who do you have winning? Oh, try it again. I messed you up. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Halfway Crooks, I have.
Okay. What's your one word?
Dominance.
All right. I already don't like how this is going because when you pick, it's just going to reverse jinx us. It's all good. Mike, who you got?
I'm also going to say Halfway Crooks as well.
Jesus. All right. All right. Go ahead. What's your one word?
Joey.
Oh, brother. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to see how these words work out for you guys. That's great. Good job. Well, we don't. Okay. Awesome. Let's keep it moving. The battle of 3-0 teams. It is the Skyhawks at 8:30 and the Road Dogs. Kind of get to build up to that game, which is very exciting. Mike, your reverse on the spot. We'll go around. Who do you have winning, Road Dogs and Skyhawks?
I'm going to go Skyhawks.
Okay. And what's your one word?
I'm going to say size.
Okay. That implies a lot. See, the one word is great because that kind of means the Road Dogs don't have as much size, which is interesting because they do. So we'll see. And we'll see if they. I'm sure the Road Dogs will, let you hear it, Mike. So good, smart choice. It's all good. All right, Matt, we'll go this way. Who you got?
I'm going the Road Dogs this week.
Okay, your one word.
Family.
Interesting. Okay, we were talking a lot about that for Rags, but I like it. Road. Okay. All right. And Jess, go ahead. Who you got?
My team, the Road Dogs.
Okay, 2-1 Road. All right.
Shout
And
out.
what's your one word?
Energy.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. An easy one for the Road Dogs. All right. To close out week 4, these teams will play twice because they wanted to, and they trust me, it'll be entertaining, especially after those other 3 games that I'm sure will need more entertainment. Great. Air Mambas and the RI Warriors. Matt, you can kick this one off. So who do you have winning this one?
Air Mambas.
Okay. And your one word?
Skill.
Okay. That kind of says some things about the other team. That's all right. Jess, who you got?
I think I'm going to go Air Mambas.
Okay. And your one word?
Like, motivation.
Okay. Passion is just sitting out there, and I almost want to put it off limits, Mike, just so you know. It's too easy, but you can take it if you'd like. Mike, who do you have winning Air Mambas and RI Warriors?
I got the RI Warriors.
Okay. And what's your one word?
Bounce back.
Oh, thank God you didn't say passion or yelling or screaming or Brandon. Good God. All right, good. Those are all other easy words. Great. And I get off scot-free. Everyone tries to look at me like you didn't pick us. I said, no, I didn't pick anybody. And I never do. That's the beauty of this whole show. Put you guys on the spot, and I get to just play, what is that? Who's the neutral country? Who knows? Whatever. Switzerland, right? They're right down the middle. I'm just playing middle here. Good job, everybody. Yeah, all right, we'll see. So let's recap this really quick. 3 Rags, 3 halfway crooks. That's going to end so badly. As if Lob City needed any more motivation after what happened last week, right? They have like I think it's 90-10 overall record lifetime in the Legacy Leagues. And so, yeah, that just means that was their one loss for a while. So we'll see how that goes. Usually, if history repeats itself. We had 2-1 Road Dogs, I'm pretty sure. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I had 2-1. And then 2-1 Air Mambas, right? Mike went Warriors and didn't say yelling. Look at us. All right. Week 4 taking place on the 24th. June's almost over, which is crazy too. And then that means we get into July and the playoffs are slowly approaching. Next week is like the halfway point. So we love that, almost halfway through the season. Might do a different game next week. We'll see how it goes, especially at the halfway point, like your favorite player, whatever. Then we can do some playoff preview type stuff. But the one-word game, guys, it delivers every time. It's a great game. Mike, Matt, Jess, good job. I'm Joey. This is the podcast. Look out for the power rankings, which hopefully will change a little bit. We'll see. I have no idea as of right now. We have our scores graphics, and we have our top plays of the week. A decent week. I give it like a 6 out of 10. When the games get that competitive, there isn't as many opportunities for crazy stuff to happen because the teams are actually playing basketball, right? There's still always some good dunks, though. And then we'll be back around and keep an eye on social media, thelegacyleagues.com for all your stats and league leader stuff. And we'll be back next week on the postgame show. But, yeah, things are rolling in Rhode Island, everybody. Thanks for watching.